This is the Sky Lakes Wilderness in southwest Oregon. And this is the Millmar Ranch, located about 6 miles away. And this is Ted Birdseye, a fifth-generation Oregonian. He bought the ranch 4 years ago to raise his family alongside cattle and horses.
From a rancher's perspective, I mean, this place has so much potential. It's not that I want to go around saying, oh, look what I own. It's nothing like that. It's more of a, like, how did I end up here? It's like a dream that materialized. It's paradise except for, wolves and grasshoppers.
For centuries, when wolves overlapped with ranching operations, it was bad news for both parties. Ranchers could lose valuable livestock, and wolves could lose their lives.
The rancher has laid a complaint with the conservation officer. There's wolves around. I'm not raising cattle to feed the brutes. Get rid of them for me.
But it wasn't just ranchers who wanted to rid the country of wolves. European folklore and North American pioneers created a whole mythology around the animal. Wolves were enemies of civilization, symbols of the naturally cruel and fearsome wilderness from which humans had escaped. Ted was different. For much of his life, he was fascinated by wolves. When he was a young man, he raised one and kept it as a pet, a fact that still shocks and scares his son.
Was she mean?
Well, she was mean to some people. She didn't like some people.
Were they going to be mean to us?
No. I felt kind of a kinship. I was kind of a, that cliche of a kind of a loner and, athletic and aggressive and all of that. Probably too much testosterone, I don't know. But anyway, at one point, I felt kind of that. My feeling is mostly one of curiosity and interest.
There's been a rare sighting in California, something that hasn't been seen there in more than 80 years, and that's a wild gray wolf.
Years earlier, biologists in Northeast Oregon had given this wolf a name, OR7. He was the 7th wolf collared in the state, and they outfitted him with a GPS tracking device. He was likely born in spring 2009 in the far northeast corner of Oregon, but soon after his GPS collar was attached, he left his home pack. He dispersed more than 1,000 miles. His trek took him across the scrublands of eastern Oregon, over interstate highways, through federal forests, and across state borders. Somehow, he found a mate, another disperser from northeast Oregon. The two settled down to raise a pack near the southern Oregon town of Prospect, which, coincidentally, is where Ted lives.
Since OR7's come to Oregon, every litter of pups has been born about 6 miles from this place. They've learned that, cattle are pretty easy prey, and so they start concentrating and having breakfast, lunch, and supper. The next calf, it was still alive, but it couldn't get up. It was laying there, about, probably 10 or 12 foot of intestines hanging out of it, just in a big pile. At that point, I was just I probably would have shot one of those wolves if I would have seen it at that point. I shouldn't say that because that's a federal offense, but I was so frustrated and so mad.
This is the man tasked with keeping Ted from acting on his frustrations. John has spent his adult life working to make wolf reintroduction a success.
Particularly, I think they get it around here with OR7 because he's such a famous wolf. Everybody knows they don't want to shoot OR7. bring fury upon them.
But keeping wolves and cattle apart at the ranch has been difficult. Non-lethal methods like cloth fencing and flashing lights did not deter OR7 and his pack. Each failure required equipment teardown and brought Ted and OR7 closer to dangerous confrontation. Joseph Vail saw that confrontation brewing, so he decided to put his environmental organization to work to protect Western Oregon's wolves and Ted's cattle.
We're lucky to have OR7 here in Southwest Oregon. We are. And I know that it's not easy for some people, and it's stuff that we're going to have to figure out as a community, but wolves belong here.
Ted agreed. He just wanted to work. If the wolves left his cattle alone, Ted said he'd leave them alone too. Each side reached across the divide. Ted formed partnerships both with the government and with environmental groups like Joe's, who he invited to his ranch to hear his side of the story.
Defenders of Wildlife sent me 2 dancing men, those car lock things, with generators because we don't have enough power to operate them. And this is a topic, of course, that you can go on and on and on and try and see the other people's perspective. And the hope is, I try and see the other side's perspective. My hope is they try and see my perspective instead of just going, yep, you live in wolf country, what do you expect?
We're all feeling our way through this, right? Wolves are a part of this landscape, but they haven't been here for a long time. And so with wolf recovery in Western Oregon, we wanted to make sure that we did our best to have it work out. And we know that can't just work out for people that like wolves, but also people that have to live with them.
Which estimates now 931 wolves is probably a more likely or more accurate estimate of the total.
Many Western Oregon ranchers are now living in wolf country. But because Ted has suffered so many livestock losses, and because he's cobbled together a partnership with the government and environmental groups, he's getting something done about it.
Our solution here at Millmar Ranch is, in fact, we're starting next week, is to build a permanent New Zealand high tensile wire fence. And there's been some controversy about doing this. The reason for it here is this is in the center of the road packs territory. It's been a chronic problem spot. So we're hoping this will solve the problems that we've had with it.
This is just kind of I don't know if it's a national experiment, it's a state experiment anyhow with this fence. This one's running at almost 10,000 volts. That's very good. Yeah, with 1 amp draw, that thing is hot.
Winter has arrived in the Rogue Valley 3 months after the fence was built. So far, it has worked. There have been no wolf attacks.
We both are, standing around with our fingers crossed, hoping this is going to be the solution to the problem. So far, so good. Yep, just like I said, keep my fingers crossed, and we're all in kind of the same boat there, the biologists and then me as the cow owner. But
even if the fence continues to keep Ted's cattle safe, he, and ranchers like him, must adjust to sharing the country with wolves. It's a new reality, but an old fear. One that will take some getting used to.
thought I heard a sound way back up there. Or just wolf paranoia.